Hello and welcome back to my daily bikepacking race coverage. For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to be covering the Transcontinental Race, and this is my preview. I'm going to have a quick look at the race route, the parcours, and some of the riders to watch over the next few weeks. So without further ado, let's head over to the Transcontinental Race website and have a little look and see what's going on. So the Transcontinental Race is one of the original big bikepacking races in Europe, created by the late Mike Cool, and this is probably one of the original races that really brought bikepacking and ultra racing to the masses. I've done it a couple of times myself. You can actually see my caps from the first time I did it back in 2014 behind me. So it's one of the big ones. So in their own words, the Transcontinental Race is the definitive self-supported bicycle race across Europe. So it's there's no fixed route for the Transcontinental Race. It changes year on year, and it's a free route race. So you're given key checkpoints and key parcours which you have to go through, and then it's up to the rider to plan their own routes in between each of those checkpoints. So for this year, the race starts in Geeradsbergen in Belgium, it's the centre of Flanders. It's the home of cycling, and it's a place that the races started before. It started there for the first time in 2015. That was the second time I took part in the race. This was actually the race, and it goes up the Capelmoor. At the time, it started at midnight, but now they've moved the start time forward to 10 p.m. and it starts on Sunday, which is probably today if you've watched this as soon as it's come up. The Capelmoor is one of the famous cobble climbs from the Tour of Flanders, and there's always a big crowd, and it's lit by torches. It's a pretty cool atmosphere, and then the riders head off into the night. So this year, the first checkpoint is going to be in the Alps, so riders are going to head south straight away. I'll basically give you a quick overview using the outline view on the map here, and then I'll head over to Ride by GPS and dig into these parcours and sections with a little bit more detail. So riders will head southeast towards the Alps. The Spluga Pass in Italy is the first kind of preset parcours, but riders will have to climb up into the little Principality of Livigno for the first checkpoint. And now that's basically a high altitude. It's basically one big valley. I think it's independent from Switzerland or Italy. I can't remember which. You go in and there's like tax-free kind of shops and stuff on the way in, much like Andorra. But there's not very many ways up, so there's definitely going to be a big climb up to there. The second checkpoint, now you have to excuse my pronunciation for throughout the race, is in Slovenia, but right on the Austrian border. So it's Zognie Jezersko, I think that's how you say it. If anyone can correct me, then feel free to do so in the comments. And that's going to force the riders to make some decisions about going through the Alps or maybe dropping down and taking a flat away. The thing about Transcontinental Race and the routing is that the most direct way is not always the quickest. Sometimes it's better to go around the mountains on a flatter but faster road. So there's going to be lots of interesting things to analyse during this race. I've made my own route up. I'm obviously not racing, but if I was, I've made a route on Ride by GPS, and I'm going to talk about what I do, and then we can compare that to the race tracker and see what the racers are actually doing, and do a bit of analysis as the race goes on. After CP2, the riders are heading south, and it starts getting really interesting through here. So riders will have to pass through Croatia, potentially Bosnia, but basically the checkpoint's in Albania, which is a country I love. I've been through it on both the TCRs I did. I've been there touring. It's got a lot of character. So the checkpoint 3 it's actually in Burel, but there's a set parcours between Burel and Peshkopi, which we'll look at shortly on Ride by GPS. After that, riders head south to Meteora, which has actually been the finish location for a couple of transcontinental races, but it's not finishing there this year. The riders will then traverse across to Thessaloniki on the Aegean coast. I think it's Aegean. On the coast in Greece. So the riders will be crossing all the way across the continent. It's going to be really hilly and mountainous second part of the race, and it's certainly going to get tougher as it goes on. Before I go any further, I'll just say thank you to Holy Fat who are sponsoring my Transcontinental Race coverage. They also sponsor my Tour de Vie coverage, so I'm really grateful for them. They essentially do nut butters and basically energy bars that they're carb free, but they've got a lot of fats in. So it's basically the stuff you find in coconut oil, cocoa, things like that. So for these long endurance efforts, really good. I use it myself. Lots of calories, and it's like a very slow burn. So very, very good if you're doing this kind of crazy long ride like the Transcontinental Race. So yeah, as I said, this is the race tracker. It's on Map Progress. There's not too much. It's hard to dig into too much detail on here. So we'll be referring to this throughout the updates. But for now, I've basically made a collection on Ride with GPS. I'll put all the links to this stuff in the description below, so you can dig into it yourself. I've planned my own route, and I've also got all the parcours in there. So the next thing to do is have a little look and dig into those and see what the riders are going to expect over the next few weeks. So starting at the start, I suppose it makes sense. Let me just scroll across, and you can see here Geeradsbergen to the west of Brussels in Belgium. It's the heart of Flanders. One of the key places in professional cycling. The Tour of Flanders used to always pass over the Kapelmuur, which is the start. And yeah, it's a very famous place. And then riders are going to have to head southwest towards the Alps. I won't dig into too many of the route options now. I'll save that for the race coverage once the riders are underway. And I'll be doing the race coverage every morning. I'll be putting it out about 10 a.m. UK time, 11 in the UK, in Europe. And that should work well for the States and Australia, New Zealand, those countries. So onto the first set parcours. And you can see here that the first checkpoint isn't actually close to the parcours. Some of them are quite linked together. There might be a checkpoint in the middle of the parcours, but others are separate like this. And essentially the idea of the parcours is to guide the riders through certain areas. Quite often it's to do with safety, and more often than not it's also quite tricky, just to make the race a little bit harder. There are a lot of banned roads and tunnels on the route. There's a whole guide here with routes you're not allowed to take. I'm not going to dig into too much detail now, but it's something we'll refer to as the race continues, and that will inform why certain riders are going in certain places. For example, in the Alps there is a lot of tunnels, and obviously a lot of them are not suitable for cycling through. So this first parcours is the Splurger Pass. I think that's how you pronounce it. And as you can see, plenty of climbing. 62 miles, basically two big passes in there really. Starting in, are we Switzerland there? Yeah, we're Switzerland, aren't we? And then dropping over into Italy. So that's going to make sure it's a really tough ride there. And then the riders will have to navigate over into Livigno, which, as you can see, is basically this high altitude valley. And if we go onto the terrain layer on the Ride with GPS, you can see what we're dealing with here. Lots of mountains. There's probably going to be a fairly obvious choice in terms of route, but there might be a few other options. And it's this is the heart of the big mountains, Livigno. You're almost at 2,000 meters up there, so yeah, it's going to be a tough crack to get to that first checkpoint. But yeah, I suspect the first riders will be there in 2 or 3 days. But again, we'll dig into further details on that tomorrow. So once the riders have been into Livigno, they are then heading over to northern Slovenia. Again, it's going to be very mountainous. Getting across there, you've got to go through the Dolomites or skirt around the Dolomites, depending on how your preference for routes. But even on the foothills here, there's some big climbs in here. I've toured through this area before, so I've got a little bit of knowledge about it. So I'll show a few photos and things like that once we get to that part of the coverage. And as you can see, this particular checkpoint is on the parcours. Now you're going to have to excuse my pronunciations in this part of the world. So yeah, this the checkpoint's at the Svetgora mountain retreat, which is kind of. It's before the bulk of this parcours, but yeah, a nice winding mountain road. Again, it looks beautiful. If we go for the little, my favourite tool, the simple one, the little Google man, we can dump that on the road here, and see what the riders have to deal with. It looks like Yeah, it is surface, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's elements of gravel there. It's quite a small mountain road, but look at that. Absolutely beautiful. What a treat for those who are going to be going across that road in about, well, probably 4 or 5 days from now. So the third parcours, essentially CP2 marks the turn south. And this is when the Transcontinental Race gets super interesting. The first time I did it in 2014, I was really quite scared about heading south into Albania, and I got there and just realised it's an absolutely fantastic country and great culture. There's going to be a couple of options in terms of navigating south. The 2 TCRs I took the same route each time once we got into the south. Just the second time, just because I was more familiar with it, and it wasn't any slower than the other options. So I went on the coastal route. But riders will probably, there's going to be 2 options. Obviously, they're going to be up here. So a straight line would say you're going to either go down to the coast or maybe skirt this Bosnian border. It's definitely flatter down the coast. Again, it's going to be interesting, and I'll do further analysis on that as we get down there. But they need to be getting to Burrell. There's a lot of banned roads in this region. So again, we'll look at the map and that will explain a lot of things once we get there. But yeah, the checkpoint's in Burrell, and then we've got this road through the mountains here. Now you know it's a good country when the Google Man isn't quite as useful as it is in other places. So we can't actually see what state this road is going to be in. Although I suspect it's probably going to be. It looks like it's probably going to be tarmac, but Albanian tarmac is not the silky smooth stuff you get in the north of Europe. It may as well be a gravel road. There's mixed surfaces, potholes, there's loose gravel all over it. It's really fun, really exciting. I love riding through these mountains, and that's going to be a really cool parcours. Well, in my opinion, others may think differently once they get there. So yeah, riders going to be heading right into the mountains, and this is going to force riders. There's not many options here that aren't massively mountainous, so I think we'll probably start seeing a bit of a funnel in terms of where the riders end up going. The parcours 4, actually it's split into 3 things. So I've got parcours 4A and 4B. 4C is on a separate map, but they essentially force you onto this road here. So this is a gravel road in the mountains. I don't know much about it. It's hard to really see too much from it. There's not really any kind of much in the way of like photos we can see. But I know for a fact this start section and this end section are predominantly gravel. So I guess it's a case of do riders just go over this big high pass on the gravel road, or do they do a long and arduous loop around to avoid like the dirt road? Personally, I just go for it because I like riding off road, but others, are not quite as confident off road. So that will be a big decision to make, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out as the race evolves. So yeah, parcours 4A start is here, and the end is there, and then the other one starts here. So I mean, it makes so much sense to go straight over. Otherwise, you could go all the way around, ride all the way up, and then down again. Which is going to take a lot. The 4th sector is actually linked to the CP4, which is in Meteora, which I think the Pub 38, I think that is actually where the Transcontinental Race has finished a couple of times. So obviously the race has really good relationships with those guys. So the checkpoint's there, and then we've got this long, steady climb. I think this has actually been a finished parcours in reverse, obviously the descent. A long, steady climb up, and there's some absolutely beautiful mountains around here. See if we can see on here. It's I think it's a UNESCO site, and yeah, it's just stunning. I mean, look at that, these cliffs, and I think there's loads of like monasteries and like houses and stuff built into the cliffs there. So the riders are going to be riding up this beautiful road out of Meteora. I mean, the Transcontinental Race, I feel, is a race that just rewards you the further you get in. And yeah, so that's going to be beautiful. And then finally, there's a long old parcours to finish, 91 miles, but Thessaloniki is a relatively big city, and obviously the organisers do this to try and keep people safe and show off beautiful terrain. Again, I'm not entirely sure what the terrain is going to be like. It looks like it's going to be quite small tarmac roads, but you never know in this part of the world. You can get some roads which are perfectly smooth and others which are just a little bit broken. But yeah, again, high up in the mountains, absolutely beautiful. So that's going to be an amazing place to finish. And then, yeah, the race end just down on the edge of the city here. So there should be plenty of places to stay for racers, plenty of kind of connections to get home. And if we have a look, you can see right on the front of the sea here, very nice place to finish. So that is the race route. I'm going to talk a bit about, there's so much more to talk about, but I don't want to go on too long in this preview. There's a few races. I mean, there's 300 odd riders. If you want to look into the start list, if you go onto the Transcontinental Race website, the rider list is now up, and there's loads of other initiatives like the Green Travel Fund. They've got a green leaderboard, which is for people who've basically travelled overland and not flown to the start. I'll dig into that as the race goes on, and you can see the complete start list on here. I'm not going to go through everyone because that'll take ages, but I've picked out a few riders who I think will do really well. I mean, to be honest, the top three on that list are my favourites for the overall. So I'm going to start with the men and then focus on the women afterwards. So last year's defending champion is back, Christof Strasser. Now this guy, he's last year's Transcontinental was his first sort of delve into self-supported bikepack racing, but he's got pedigree. He's won the Race Across America, which is basically a supported ultra race, 6 times. He holds a record. He's a 24-hour world record holder. So he did 637 miles in 24 hours, which is absolutely insane. So he did that on a time trial bike. I think this was the effort. So, full on aero kit, but, he's got pedigree, he's got a motor, and he proved it last year at the Transcontinental Race. He won the thing, and he started slow, and then he came through really strong at the end, and, a lot of people burnt themselves early on. But yeah, he came good. The second person I want to talk about is Robin Gemperle, and he actually, I think he was 6th or 7th last year in the Transcontinental Race, but he really went out hard early on, and he was leading at a certain point. And again, I think that was his first foray into this real long distance ultra stuff, but he's got pedigree as well. I mean, the guy used to race mountain biking on the Scott Pro team. So if you're not familiar with mountain biking, then basically that is the number one mountain bike team. He was there as a development rider. It's a team of Nino Schurter, who's like 7 times world champion. So you don't just get on that team without having some serious talent. So yeah, this guy, he's got the engine, he's got the motor. Maybe pro racing didn't work out for him, but he's making a good shout at bikepacking now. Maybe he made a few mistakes that went out too hard last year in the Transcontinental Race, but he seems to be learning. He won the Atlas Mountain Race earlier this year. You can go back and see my race coverage of that if you want to see how that panned out. But yeah, he's got skills on a mountain bike, and he's got the engine, and I think he was going to be right up there this year. The other person I've highlighted is Marin de Saint-Exupéry. Now this guy, I know Marin pretty well actually. He actually finished second to last in his first attempt. This is his 4th attempt now. And last year he did an absolute fly. He made a few mistakes early on. I think he was like 36th or something at the first checkpoint, but he managed to finish in the top 5, and he was 10th at the final checkpoint, and then in the final run to the line he just did an absolute smasher. Came strong. I know he's training really hard for this. He's learning all the time. He's also won the Atlas Mountain Race. So yeah, we've got a really strong top 3 there, and I can't really see much past those guys for the overall. But there's 300 riders, and you never know who else is in the field. There's also quite a few female riders. I think it's a slightly more open female field. However, there's a couple of names that people I know and that have got good pedigree. So Nikki Shaw, she's done Transcontinental Race before, and I think experience counts for a lot in this race. She's also done things like the two volcano sprint down in southern Italy, and All Points North, which is quite a tough ultra in the UK. She knows a lot about it. She's pretty experienced now, and like I say, that really does count for a lot. The previous winner, Fiona Kolbinger, she actually won the race overall in 2019, beat all the men, everyone. She's not here this year, so that's why I say I think it's a little bit more open than it has been. So yeah, I'll be keeping an eye out for Nikki, and be good to see how she gets on. And then another fellow Brit, Jamie Wilson. She's got a lot of experience. She's cycled around the world. She's not ridden Transcontinental Race before, but she's done GB Duro. She was the first woman at GB Duro, but also third overall, up against all the men. And I'm pretty sure that she won't be settling for first woman in this race. She wants a solid result out of everyone. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Jamie gets on. And of course, the other thing as well, there's a lot of unknown names in the field. Certainly in the women's field, the sport's growing overall, and women's participation is getting more and more. So yeah, there could be someone that we've not even touched on yet who could win it. So yeah, it's going to be really exciting to watch. So the race starts Sunday evening. That'll be later today if you're watching this video on Sunday. I'll be back every morning doing live updates. I'm hopefully going to get in contact with some of the riders. So if anyone's riding and watching and they want to drop me a voice note, drop me a comment, or drop me a message on Instagram. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you every day for the next few weeks.